Your sister's family gets the guest room so you can sleep on the floor. Mom tossed two deflated sleeping bags at my feet while my 5-year-old son shivered beside me. My sister laughed, sipping her champagne, and told me I should have booked a cheap motel. I looked at my freezing children and whispered to pack their things. We walked out into a blizzard at 1 in the morning. 3 days later, my mother discovered exactly what I quietly canceled, resulting in 110 desperate missed calls. My name is Naomi. I am 31 years old, and this is how I destroyed my family's fake elite facade. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to set ruthless boundaries with toxic relatives. The drive up the treacherous mountain roads to Aspen took exactly 6 hours of white-knuckle terror. A massive winter storm had rolled in earlier that afternoon, dropping thick sheets of snow that completely obliterated the lane markers. The heater in my SUV blasted at full volume, but the bitter cold still managed to seep through the windows. In the back seat, my 5-year-old son Leo was holding his little sister Mia, who had just turned 3. They were both exhausted, cranky, and crying for the warmth of their grandmother's house. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. We were supposed to be celebrating Thanksgiving and my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Beatrice, my mother, had bragged for weeks about the spectacular mega mansion she had managed to secure for the entire family. She claimed she pulled strings with elite connections to get the 8-bedroom estate. I knew the truth, of course, but I kept my mouth shut to keep the peace. When the massive wrought iron gates of the estate finally loomed out of the swirling snow, a wave of profound relief washed over me. I punched the access code into the keypad, the heavy gates swinging open to reveal a sprawling timber and stone mansion glowing warmly against the dark mountain sky. I parked near the grand entrance, unbuckled my shivering children, and carried Mia while holding Leo by the hand. We trudged up the massive heated stone steps, the snow swirling violently around us. I pushed open the heavy oak double doors, expecting the smell of roasted turkey and the warmth of a family welcome. Instead, the sheer hostility in the grand foyer hit me harder than the freezing wind outside. Beatrice stood directly under the glittering crystal chandelier wearing pristine silk loungewear and a deeply annoyed expression. She did not step forward to hug her grandchildren. She did not offer to take our snow-covered coats. She simply crossed her arms and glared at the puddle of melted snow forming beneath my boots on the imported marble floor. My father Howard stood a few paces behind her, holding a glass of bourbon, looking entirely useless and avoiding my eyes. "You are tracking mud everywhere, Naomi," my mother snapped. Before I could even apologize for the weather, 2 cheap, thin nylon sleeping bags hit the floor at my feet with a pathetic thud. I stared at the crumpled bags, then back up at my mother. Mia buried her cold face into my neck while Leo gripped my leg tightly. "What is this?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the long drive. "Stephanie and Jamal need the extra space," Beatrice stated, adjusting her silk robe. "They have very important business to conduct tomorrow morning. You and the kids can set up these sleeping bags in the hallway near the mudroom." I stood completely frozen, processing the sheer cruelty of her words. This mansion had 8 master suites. 8 massive bedrooms with king-sized beds, heated floors, and en-suite bathrooms. There was absolutely no logistical reason for my young children to sleep on a drafty hallway floor. Right on cue, my older sister Stephanie descended the grand sweeping staircase. She was 34 years old, but still acted like a spoiled teenager demanding the biggest slice of the cake. She wore designer cashmere from head to toe, her hair perfectly blown out despite the late hour. "Do not look so dramatic, Naomi," Stephanie sneered, leaning against the mahogany banister. "Jamal and I need the East Wing Master Suite for our luggage and wardrobe. We also need the West Wing Office Suite completely empty so Jamal can set up his professional lighting for a Zoom call with overseas investors tomorrow. We cannot have your noisy kids running around ruining the aesthetic. If you find sleeping on the floor inconvenient, you really should have booked a hotel down in the valley like a normal, struggling single mother." Footsteps echoed from the upper landing, and my brother-in-law Jamal appeared beside Stephanie. Jamal was an African-American finance director who made sure everyone in the room knew exactly how much his custom-tailored suits cost. He oozed corporate arrogance, swirling a glass of Opus One red wine in his hand. He looked down at me and my shivering children with absolute disdain. "Listen," Naomi, Jamal said, his voice dripping with condescension. "In the real world, adults who cannot afford luxury accommodations do not get to complain about where they sleep. Your sister and I bring actual wealth to this family. We generate millions. I have stakeholders in Dubai waiting for my market analysis at dawn. I cannot be distracted by toddlers crying because they do not have a proper bed. The mudroom builds character. Take it or leave it." I looked back at my mother, expecting her to intervene. Surely she would not let her son-in-law speak to me this way. Surely she would not force her own grandchildren to sleep on cold hardwood while empty luxury suites sat vacant just to hold Stephanie's suitcases. Beatrice simply sighed heavily, acting as though my presence was a massive burden. "It is not our fault you chose to be a struggling single mother, Naomi. Your sister married well. Jamal is a brilliant investment director. Your father and I already paid for Stephanie's extravagant wedding in Tuscany 6 years ago. We should not have to subsidize your poor life choices too. Jamal and Stephanie earned those rooms. You did not. Now pick up the sleeping bags and get out of the main foyer before you ruin the rug." There was no internal debate. There was no desperate pleading for my mother to love me. The blatant favoritism, the constant gaslighting, the unrelenting financial shaming had finally reached a threshold I was no longer willing to cross. I looked at my 5-year-old son. Leo was rubbing his tired eyes, his little shoulders shaking from the cold draft blowing in from the slightly open front door. He clutched his small, plush dinosaur toy, looking up at me with absolute trust. Mia was already half asleep against my chest, her breathing shallow and ragged. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice. I felt a sudden icy calm wash over my entire body. I looked directly into Beatrice's eyes and saw nothing but a shallow, status-obsessed woman who cared more about impressing her fake elite son-in-law than the well-being of her own flesh and blood. "Put your hat back on, Leo," I whispered gently, crouching down to his eye level while balancing Mia on my hip. "We are leaving." Beatrice stepped forward, her face flushing with sudden anger. "Excuse me," she demanded, her voice echoing sharply against the vaulted ceiling. "Where exactly do you think you are going at 1 a.m. in a blizzard?" "We are not sleeping on the floor, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You have 8 vacant suites in this house. If you choose to prioritize Stephanie's luggage over your grandchildren having a bed, then we have no reason to stay here. If you walk out that door, Naomi, do not expect a dime from us ever," Beatrice threatened, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "You will ruin this entire Thanksgiving. You always do this. You always play the victim to ruin my perfect events." Jamal laughed, taking a slow, deliberate sip of his expensive wine. "Let her go freeze in her beat-up car, Beatrice. She probably cannot even afford the gas to drive back down the mountain. She will be begging to sleep in the mudroom by 2 a.m. Stephanie chimed in, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Just let the loser leave, Mom. She is just jealous that she could never land a high-value man like Jamal." I did not bother engaging with their pathetic delusions. I simply zipped Mia's coat up to her chin, took Leo by his small gloved hand, and turned my back on all of them. I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped back out into the freezing, brutal winds of the Aspen snowstorm. The heavy thud of the mansion doors closing behind me sounded like a prison vault finally sealing shut. The cold was shocking, biting through my thin jacket, but the fire burning inside my chest kept me moving forward. I secured the children in their car seats, making sure the blankets were tucked tightly around them. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the heater roaring to life. The mansion stood illuminated in the rearview mirror, a fortress of fake wealth and toxic cruelty. Jamal thought I was a broke single mother who could not afford gas. Beatrice thought she held all the financial power. Stephanie thought her luxury vacation was entirely secure. As I shifted the car into drive and carefully navigated the icy driveway away from the estate, a ruthless smile finally crept across my face. They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea that the struggling single mother they just kicked out into a blizzard was the founder and chief executive officer of the very luxury estate management company that controlled the keys to that exact mansion. They thought they had won the ultimate power play. They did not realize I held the power to end their entire fake reality with one simple click. The storm outside howled with renewed ferocity as I guided my SUV back onto the treacherous mountain roads. Visibility was almost zero, and the biting wind threatened to push my vehicle off the icy pavement. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white against the dark interior of the car. In the back seat, Mia had fallen back asleep, her soft breathing a fragile comfort against the roar of the blizzard. Leo was awake, his small face pressed against the window, watching the swirling snow. "Where are we going, Mommy?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We are going to a place where we are actually wanted, sweetie," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "A place where you will have the biggest, warmest bed you have ever seen." I focused completely on the road ahead, pushing the anger and betrayal to the back of my mind. There would be time to deal with Beatrice, Stephanie, and Jamal later. Right now, my only priority was getting my children to safety. After a grueling 20-minute drive navigating hairpin turns and black ice, the glowing entrance of the St. Regis Aspen Resort finally appeared through the driving snow. I pulled into the covered circular driveway, the sudden shelter a stark contrast to the brutal conditions outside. Before I even put the car in park, two bellmen wearing heavy winter coats rushed out from the grand entrance. They approached the vehicle, their expressions shifting from professional courtesy to immediate recognition the moment they saw my face through the window. "Ms. Hayes," one of them exclaimed, rushing to open my door. "We did not know you were coming tonight." I stepped out of the car, the freezing air biting at my cheeks. "I apologize for the unannounced arrival, David," I said, pulling my coat tighter around me. The weather took a turn, and my previous accommodations fell through. David immediately waved over a valet, handing him my keys. "We will take care of everything, Ms. Hayes. Let us get you and the children inside." I unbuckled Leo and Mia, carefully lifting my sleeping daughter into my arms. Leo grabbed my free hand, shivering as we walked through the automatic sliding doors into the opulent lobby. The contrast was jarring. While the mega mansion had felt cold and hostile, the St. Regis radiated warmth and understated luxury. A massive stone fireplace crackled with a roaring fire, casting a golden glow over the plush seating areas and polished wood floors. The general manager, a distinguished man named Mr. Sterling, hurried across the lobby, his face a mixture of surprise and genuine concern. "Naomi," he said, extending his hand. "What a pleasant surprise. We were not expecting you until the annual review next month." I shook his hand, managing a tired smile. "A change of plans, Mr. Sterling. I need a suite for tonight, preferably the penthouse if it is available." "Of course, right away," he replied, motioning to the front desk staff. "I will have them prepare the presidential suite immediately. Is there anything else you need?" "Just some warm milk for the children and perhaps a late dinner," I said, glancing down at Leo, who was staring wide-eyed at the grand surroundings. "We have had a very long night." "Consider it done, Naomi," Mr. Sterling assured me. "We will have room service send up a specialized menu for the little ones right away." As we waited for the suite to be prepared, several other staff members approached, greeting me with respectful nods and polite inquiries about my well-being. It was a surreal experience. Just an hour ago, I had been humiliated and discarded by my own family, treated like an unwelcome burden. Here I was, acknowledged, respected, and accommodated without hesitation. The staff here did not know the details of my personal life, but they knew my professional standing. They knew that my company, Elite Estates Management, oversaw a portfolio of high-end properties across the country, including several exclusive partnerships with the St. Regis brand. They knew I was the founder and CEO, a woman who had built a successful enterprise from the ground up. To them, I was not a struggling single mother. I was a valued partner and a respected leader. Mr. Sterling personally escorted us to the presidential suite, taking the private elevator to the top floor. He opened the double doors, revealing a sprawling, luxurious space that took my breath away. The suite was immaculate, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-covered mountains, a grand living area with a fireplace, and two massive bedrooms with plush, king-sized beds. "I will leave you to settle in, Naomi," Mr. Sterling said, handing me the keycards. "Room service will be up shortly. Please let us know if you require anything else." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I appreciate your prompt assistance," I replied, closing the door behind him. I carried Mia into the master bedroom, gently laying her down on the impossibly soft mattress. I covered her with a thick down comforter, watching as she burrowed into the warmth, her breathing slowing to a peaceful rhythm. I turned to find Leo standing in the doorway, his eyes scanning the opulent room. "Is this where we are sleeping tonight, Mommy?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "Yes, Leo," I smiled, kneeling down to his level. "This is our bed tonight. It is much better than sleeping on the floor, isn't it?" He nodded vigorously, wrapping his small arms around my neck. "I like it here, Mommy. It is warm." I held him tightly, burying my face in his soft hair. The tension that had coiled in my chest since arriving at the mega mansion finally began to loosen. I had protected my children. I had removed them from a toxic environment and brought them to a place of comfort and safety. That was all that mattered in this moment. Room service arrived shortly after, delivering a tray of warm milk, freshly baked cookies, and a selection of comforting dishes. I coaxed Leo into eating a small meal before tucking him into bed beside his sister. I sat on the edge of the mattress, watching them sleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of their chests, a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. The silence of the suite was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace in the living room. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the blizzard raging outside. The snow continued to fall relentlessly, burying the landscape in a thick, white blanket. My mind drifted back to the confrontation in the foyer. Beatrice's cruel words, Stephanie's entitled sneer, Jamal's arrogant dismissiveness. They had crossed a line tonight, a line that could never be uncrossed. They had assumed I was powerless, that my silence was a sign of weakness, that my status as a single mother made me an easy target for their vitriol. They were wrong. They were so fundamentally, dangerously wrong. I walked over to my overnight bag, retrieving my laptop. I sat down at the elegant writing desk in the corner of the living room, opening the screen. The glow of the monitor illuminated my face in the dim room. It was time to show them exactly who they had underestimated. It was time to dismantle the facade they had so carefully constructed. The game was over. The consequences were about to begin. I launched the secure virtual private network for elite estates management. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in the administrative credentials that granted me absolute access to our entire global portfolio. The dashboard loaded instantly, displaying real-time metrics for hundreds of luxury properties across North America. I bypassed the revenue charts and clicked directly into the active reservations tab. I typed Alpine Crest into the search bar. That was our internal designation for the 8-bedroom Aspen mega mansion my family currently occupied. The property file materialized on my screen. I navigated to the billing and correspondence history. Seeing the digital paper trail laid out before me brought a bitter smile to my lips. It was fascinating how people documented their own desperation. I clicked open the initial inquiry email dated exactly 4 months ago. The sender was Beatrice. She had submitted the request through our public-facing luxury concierge portal, completely unaware that the chief executive officer reviewing escalated requests was her own discarded daughter. I read my mother's words again, letting the sheer hypocrisy of her groveling tone wash over me. "To whom it may concern," the email began. "I am reaching out regarding a potential collaboration for a highly publicized 40th wedding anniversary. My son-in-law is a prominent investment director with ties to overseas wealth funds. Hosting our celebration at your Alpine Crest property would provide unparalleled exposure for your management group among the absolute upper echelon of high-net-worth individuals. We are requesting a fully complimentary 7-day stay in exchange for this elite networking opportunity." I scrolled down to the subsequent emails in the thread. When my reservations team initially politely declined her absurd proposal for a free $50,000 vacation, Beatrice had grown frantic. She sent 4 follow-up emails, practically begging the faceless management team. She claimed severe financial hardship regarding her husband's recent retirement, but insisted that maintaining social appearances was critical for her son-in-law's upcoming investment seminars. She actually used the phrase, "We need this venue to secure crucial investor confidence." She was practically admitting that Jamal and Stephanie were using this fake luxury vacation as a prop to lure in money. I leaned back in the plush leather desk chair, staring at the ceiling of the penthouse. I remembered the exact afternoon I had intercepted that email thread. I was sitting in my corner office in Manhattan, reviewing quarterly projections. When I saw my mother's name on the rejected client list, my heart had genuinely ached for her. Despite the years of subtle digs and blatant favoritism towards Stephanie, I still craved my mother's approval. I wanted her 40th anniversary to be beautiful. I wanted her to feel special. So I had made a quiet executive decision. I opened the financial ledger attached to the Alpine Crest booking on my screen. There it was in black and white. A direct transfer of $50,000 from my personal checking account to cover the property owner's guaranteed revenue and the daily staffing costs. I had manually overridden the system, changing the billing code to a VIP corporate complimentary stay. I essentially bought the mansion for a week and gifted it to my parents anonymously so they could save face and feel like true elites. I did not want the credit. I just wanted them to be happy. And how did they repay that silent $50,000 gift? By throwing deflated sleeping bags at my shivering children. By letting Jamal, a man whose entire financial existence was apparently built on smoke and mirrors, mock my status as a single mother. By trying to banish me to a freezing hallway so Stephanie could have a designated room just for her designer luggage. I scrolled past the emails and opened the active digital contract. Beatrice's electronic signature sat at the bottom of the page, agreeing to all terms and conditions of the promotional stay. Clause Section 4, Paragraph 2 caught my eye. The management reserves the right to revoke complimentary status at any time without prior notice if the primary guest violates property conduct guidelines or if the authorizing executive terminates the promotional agreement. Upon revocation, the primary guest will be immediately liable for the standard nightly rate of $7,142 plus all applicable taxes and event deposits. Jamal had stood in the foyer, swirling his expensive wine, bragging about generating millions. He had laughed at the idea of me not being able to afford gas. He stood inside a multi-million-dollar fortress of wealth, completely oblivious to the fact that I was the architect of the walls surrounding him. Stephanie had called me a loser who was jealous of her high-value man. A high-value man who needed his mother-in-law to beg for a free vacation home so he could pretend to be successful on his video calls. Elite estates management catered to actual billionaires, tech founders, and international diplomats. We managed assets that required absolute discretion and flawless execution. I built this company by understanding contracts leverage and the psychology of wealthy clients. I knew exactly how fragile the egos of the fake rich truly were. Beatrice and Jamal did not have real wealth. They had maxed out credit cards and leased cars. They survived on the illusion of prosperity. Taking away that illusion would hurt them far more than any screaming match in a hallway ever could. I looked at the digital contract one last time. My mother's signature stared back at me, a legally binding tether to reality. I had given them a week of absolute luxury out of the goodness of my heart. They responded by showing me exactly how little my heart meant to them. They wanted to treat me like a worthless outsider while sleeping under a roof I paid for. That arrangement was officially over. I moved my cursor to the top right corner of the administration panel, hovering over the glowing red button labeled Revoke Promotion and Build a Card on File. I clicked the mouse. A security dialog box immediately popped up on the center of my screen, requiring my master administrative authorization code to finalize the revocation. I typed my password with steady fingers and hit enter. The screen refreshed, and the financial dashboard for the Alpine Crest property instantly transformed. The green zero balance that I had personally subsidized vanished into the digital ether. In its place, a staggering red number populated the total amount due. I scrolled down to review the itemized invoice that the management software had automatically generated. The standard nightly rate for the estate during peak Thanksgiving week was $7,142. Multiplied by their planned 7-night stay, the base accommodation cost alone came to $49,994. But my family was not just staying in an empty house. Beatrice had requested the full premium hospitality package. She wanted a private chef, daily housekeeping staff, and a dedicated chauffeur on standby. The system ruthlessly calculated these additions line by line. $5,000 for the staffing retainer, $3,000 for the premium grocery stocking service they had already consumed upon arrival. Then there was the anniversary party itself. Beatrice was hosting a lavish celebration on Saturday night for 50 local socialites she desperately wanted to impress. The non-refundable event deposit was $20,000. When the state taxes and local luxury resort fees were applied, the final sum sitting on the invoice was a staggering $85,412. I pulled up the payment profile associated with the reservation. During the initial booking process, our concierge protocol requires a credit card on file for incidental damages regardless of complimentary status. Beatrice had provided her platinum credit card. However, the notes from the local estate manager indicated that upon arrival, Jamal had ostentatiously demanded they switch the incidentals card to his personal account. He wanted to make sure the staff saw him handing over his sleek metal corporate card to assert his dominance as the wealthy son-in-law. That arrogant gesture was about to backfire spectacularly. I highlighted Jamal's card profile and initiated the automated billing sequence. The software communicated directly with our merchant processor, attempting to authorize a hold for the full $85,000. I watched the spinning loading wheel on my screen, counting the seconds as the transaction processed. Less than a minute later, the system spit back a bright yellow error code. Transaction declined due to insufficient funds. I let out a soft laugh that barely disturbed the quiet of the penthouse. Jamal, the high-rolling investment director, who claimed to generate millions, could not even clear an $85,000 hold. He was completely leveraged. I ran the secondary card using Beatrice's platinum account. Another spinning loading wheel, followed by another yellow error code. Transaction declined due to credit limit exceeded. They were completely broke. Both of them were maintaining a pathetic house of cards, and I had just pulled out the foundation. According to Elite Estates Management Protocol, when a guest fails to provide valid payment for an active luxury stay, the system shifts the property into a critical delinquency status. I did not need to make a single phone call or yell at anyone to enact my revenge. I simply let the corporate policy I wrote 5 years ago do the heavy lifting for me. I checked the boxes to authorize the automated delinquency workflow. At exactly 7 in the morning, an automated email and text message would be dispatched to Beatrice and Jamal, alerting them that their complimentary status had been revoked due to an executive override. The message would politely but firmly demand an immediate alternative payment method to clear the outstanding balance. If they failed to provide a working credit card by 8 in the morning, the system would escalate the situation to the local Aspen estate manager. He would be dispatched to the property to collect payment in person. If they still could not pay, standard eviction protocols would commence immediately. But I was not quite finished making adjustments. I navigated to the smart home integration panel for the Alpine Crest mansion. The property was equipped with state-of-the-art automation, allowing our management team to control every aspect of the guest experience remotely. Since they were no longer paying guests, they no longer required premium amenities. I disabled the radiant floor heating in the grand foyer, where they had forced my children to stand shivering. I turned off the ambient climate control for the East Wing Master Suite, where Stephanie was currently hoarding her designer luggage. I lowered the temperature in the West Wing office, where Jamal planned to host his fake investor calls, dropping it to a brisk 50 degrees. Let him explain to his stakeholders in Dubai why he was wearing a winter parka indoors. Next, I accessed the exterior property controls. I turned off the heated driveway system. The blizzard outside was dumping inches of snow by the hour, ensuring their leased luxury vehicles would be completely snowed in by morning. I deactivated their personalized entry codes for the main gate and the front door. If any of them stepped outside to retrieve something from their cars, they would be locked out entirely. They would have to call the emergency concierge line and beg to be let back in. Finally, I electronically locked the climate-controlled wine cellar. Jamal had been swirling a bottle of Opus One when he insulted me. I knew the cellar was stocked with vintage bottles worth thousands of dollars. They would not be drinking another drop of my inventory. I reviewed the dashboard one last time, ensuring every setting was locked and every protocol was armed. The trap was set, and the timer was ticking. I logged out of the secure network and closed my laptop, the sudden darkness of the screen reflecting my own calm expression. I stood up from the writing desk and stretched my aching muscles. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape and my retaliation was finally beginning to ebb, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion. But it was a clean, liberating exhaustion. The heavy, toxic weight of trying to earn my family's love had completely vanished. I no longer cared what Beatrice thought of my career. I no longer cared about Stephanie's manufactured superiority. I no longer cared about Howard's cowardly silence. I walked back into the master bedroom. The suite was comfortably warm, a stark contrast to the blizzard raging against the reinforced glass windows. Mia was sleeping soundly, curled into a tiny ball beneath the down comforter. Leo was sprawled on his back, his small chest rising and falling in a deep, peaceful rhythm. I carefully slipped off my boots and heavy sweater, changing into the plush, complimentary robe provided by the hotel. I slid into the massive king-sized bed, pulling the covers up around me. The sheets felt like a warm embrace. I wrapped one arm protectively around Leo and rested my hand gently on Mia's back. For the first time in 31 years, I felt entirely in control of my own life. I had built a fortress of success that my family could neither understand nor penetrate. They had thrown me out into the cold thinking I would freeze. They had no idea I controlled the weather. I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet breathing of my children. In just a few hours, the sun would rise over the Rocky Mountains. And when it did, the alarm clocks in the Alpine Crest mansion would ring, ushering in a morning of absolute, undeniable financial ruin for the people who had tried to break me. I drifted off to sleep, a genuine smile resting on my face, completely ready for tomorrow. The morning sun broke over the snow-capped peaks of Aspen, casting a brilliant, blinding light across the valley. Inside the Alpine Crest mansion, Beatrice awoke in the master suite, stretching luxuriously beneath high thread count sheets. She smiled to herself, already anticipating the day ahead. Her 40th anniversary party was going to be the social event of the season, a crowning achievement that would solidify her family's status among the absolute elite. She threw off the covers and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet drapes. Her smile faltered slightly. The snow was piled high against the glass, and the driveway was completely buried. The heated driveway system she had specifically requested was apparently malfunctioning. She frowned, making a mental note to complain to the management company. She paid good money. Well, she had charmed her way into a free stay, but the principle remained the same. She expected flawless service. Down the hall, Jamal was also awake. He was pacing the length of the West Wing office, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in hushed, urgent tones, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was trying to secure another round of funding from a hesitant investor in Dubai, and the freezing temperature of the office was not helping his mood. He rubbed his arms, shivering in his silk pajamas. He checked the thermostat, annoyed to find it set to 50 degrees. He tried to adjust it, but the digital interface remained stubbornly unresponsive. Stephanie was still asleep in the East Wing, her face buried in a silk pillowcase. Her dreams were filled with visions of diamonds and expensive champagne, completely oblivious to the impending disaster. Howard was downstairs in the kitchen attempting to make coffee, but the espresso machine seemed overly complicated. At exactly 7:30 in the morning, the heavy oak front doors of the mansion echoed with a sharp, authoritative knock. Beatrice, who had just descended the stairs wrapped in a cashmere robe, paused. She glanced at Howard, who shrugged helplessly. "Are we expecting someone this early?" Beatrice asked, her voice laced with irritation. The private chef is not supposed to arrive until 10. The knocking sounded again, louder this time. Beatrice sighed dramatically, tightening the sash of her robe. I will handle this. It is probably just the maintenance staff coming to fix the driveway heater. She glided across the foyer, her chin held high, and pulled open the heavy doors. A man in a tailored overcoat stood on the porch, flanked by two individuals wearing security uniforms. The man held a tablet in his hand, his expression professionally detached. Mrs. Hayes? He asked, his voice crisp and clear. Yes, Beatrice replied, her tone instantly adopting an air of superiority. And who might you be? My name is Mr. Vance. I am the local estate manager for Elite Estates Management, he said, stepping slightly forward. I apologize for the early intrusion, but there is an urgent matter regarding your reservation that requires immediate attention. Beatrice bristled at the word urgent. She despised anything that interrupted her carefully planned schedule. Whatever it is, it can wait, she said dismissively. We are busy preparing for a very important event. You need to fix the driveway heater and the thermostat in the West Wing office immediately. My son-in-law is freezing. Mr. Vance did not flinch. I am afraid the climate control issues are the least of your concerns right now, Mrs. Hayes. I am here because your complimentary promotional status for this property has been revoked by executive order. Beatrice stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. Revoked. What do you mean revoked? We have an agreement. I spoke with the concierge team personally. The promotional agreement was terminated at 1:15 this morning, Mr. Vance explained, tapping the screen of his tablet. According to Clause Section 4, Paragraph 2 of your signed contract, the management reserves the right to revoke complimentary status at any time without prior notice. This is absurd, Beatrice sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. You cannot just cancel our stay. We are hosting a party for 50 VIP guests tonight. I will speak to your superior. I will have your job for this. My superior is the one who authorized the revocation, Mr. Vance replied calmly. Therefore, you are now liable for the standard nightly rate for the duration of your stay, plus all applicable taxes and event deposits. Beatrice's face flushed a deep, angry red. Fine, she snapped. If you insist on being petty, I will pay your ridiculous fees. How much is it? The total outstanding balance is $85,412. Mr. Vance stated, his voice unwavering. We attempted to authorize the payment using the credit cards on file, but both transactions were declined. Declined. Beatrice echoed, the color suddenly draining from her face. That is impossible. There must be a mistake with your system. My husband's platinum card has a substantial limit. The system declined the transaction due to the credit limit being exceeded, Mr. Vance clarified. We also attempted to run the corporate card provided by Mr. Jamal, but that was declined due to insufficient funds. Beatrice felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Insufficient funds. Jamal's card. The son-in-law who supposedly generated millions. The man who was currently pacing upstairs trying to secure foreign investment. How could his card be declined? I need a valid form of payment immediately. Mrs. Hayes. Mr. Vance continued, his tone shifting from professional courtesy to firm demand. We require a $50,000 credit card authorization for the week's accommodations, plus a $20,000 deposit for the anniversary event tonight. If you cannot provide payment, we will have no choice but to initiate eviction protocols. Eviction. Beatrice whispered the word, tasting like ash in her mouth. You cannot evict us. We have guests arriving. We have reputations to maintain. I assure you we can and we will, Mr. Vance said, stepping back slightly. You have exactly 1 hour to provide a valid payment method. If the balance is not cleared by 8:30 a.m., my security team will escort you off the premises. He turned and walked away, the two security guards following closely behind. Beatrice stood in the open doorway, the freezing wind whipping around her silk robe, staring blankly at the snow-covered driveway. The pristine facade of her wealthy elite existence was cracking, revealing the hollow foundation beneath. She closed the heavy oak doors, her hands trembling violently. She leaned against the cool wood, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She needed a plan. She needed money. She needed Jamal. Jamal. She screamed, her voice echoing through the silent mansion. Jamal, get down here right now. Jamal bounded down the sweeping mahogany staircase, his expensive silk slippers slapping against the wood. He clutched his smartphone in one hand, his face twisted into a mask of pure irritation. Behind him, Stephanie trailed down the stairs, wrapping a designer cashmere blanket around her shoulders and glaring at her mother. What is going on? Beatrice Jamal demanded, snapping his phone shut. I am in the middle of negotiating a 7-figure capital injection with my partners in Dubai. The temperature in my office is barely above freezing, and now you are screaming my name like a banshee. I cannot work under these conditions. Stephanie reached the bottom step and crossed her arms. Seriously, Mom, you are ruining our morning. We are supposed to be relaxing before the big anniversary gala tonight. Why are the front doors wide open? It is freezing. Beatrice ignored her daughter and marched directly up to Jamal. Her chest heaved beneath her silk robe, her eyes wide with a frantic, manic energy. We have a massive problem, Jamal, she hissed, grabbing his arm. The estate manager was just here. They are trying to evict us. They say the promotional stay was canceled in the middle of the night. Jamal let out a loud, arrogant bark of laughter. He pulled his arm away from his mother-in-law and smoothed the lapels of his pajama top. Evict us. Do you hear yourself, Beatrice? People like us do not get evicted. There is obviously a clerical error in their booking system. I will call the concierge desk and have whoever is responsible fired before breakfast. It is not a clerical error, Beatrice shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. The manager stood right there on our porch with 2 security guards. He said we owe $85,000 for the week and the party deposit. And Jamal, he said your corporate card declined. He said you have insufficient funds. The foyer went dead silent. The only sound was the howling wind whipping snow against the massive front windows. Stephanie let out a sharp scoff, waving her hand dismissively. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Jamal manages a massive investment portfolio. His corporate card has a limit higher than this entire property is worth. Jamal immediately puffed out his chest, his ego bruised but his arrogance entirely intact. Exactly, Stephanie. It is clearly a fraud alert. My bank is incredibly strict about large unexpected charges, especially when processed by third-party vendors in remote locations like Aspen. They must have flagged the transaction to protect my assets. This is basic financial security protocol, Beatrice. You should understand how these things work. Howard emerged from the kitchen holding a lukewarm cup of coffee, looking thoroughly bewildered. If it is just a fraud alert, then call the bank and clear it up, Howard suggested, his voice trembling slightly. The man said, we have less than an hour before they send security to throw our bags into the snow. We have catering arriving at noon for the party. The florist is supposed to be here in 2 hours. I do not need to call my bank, Jamal sneered, pulling a sleek leather wallet from his pocket. I will just go speak to this so-called manager myself. I will give him another card, override the fraud alert, and then demand a massive discount for the inconvenience and the disrespect. Where is he? He is waiting right outside on the porch, Beatrice said, pointing a shaking finger toward the heavy oak doors. Jamal marched toward the entrance, his posture radiating aggressive corporate confidence. He threw open the double doors with unnecessary force. A blast of freezing air rushed into the foyer, but Jamal ignored it. He stepped out onto the covered stone porch, confronting Mr. Vance, who was standing patiently exactly where Beatrice had left him. The 2 security guards shifted their weight, their hands resting casually on their utility belts. Listen to me very carefully, Jamal barked, pointing his finger at the estate manager. I am a managing director at a premier financial institution. I oversee accounts that would make your head spin. You do not come to my residence at 8 in the morning and threaten my family with eviction over a simple banking security hold. Mr. Vance looked at Jamal with a perfectly blank expression. He held up a mobile point-of-sale terminal. The device was sleek black and ready to process a transaction. I am not threatening you, sir, Mr. Vance replied calmly. I am informing you of the active policies enforced by Elite Estates Management. Your complimentary status was revoked by our Chief Executive Officer. You currently owe $85,412. If you would like to clear this balance right now, I have the terminal ready. Jamal scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief at the manager's audacity. He pulled his wallet open and extracted a heavy, solid metal black card. He held it up so the security guards could see the exclusive branding. This is a premium tier corporate card, Jamal boasted. It has 0 preset spending limits. My bank placed a hold on your previous attempt because your merchant processing system likely triggered a high-risk vendor alert. Run it again. And when it clears, I expect a personal apology and a complimentary bottle of your finest champagne sent to my suite. Stephanie stepped out onto the porch, shivering in her cashmere blanket, wrapping her arms around Jamal's waist. "Show them, baby," she purred, glaring at Mr. Vance. "These local hospitality workers have no idea who they are dealing with." Mr. Vance did not argue. He simply extended the mobile card reader. Jamal aggressively snatched the device and inserted the heavy metal card into the chip reader himself. He typed in a zip code and hit the bright green confirm button. He crossed his arms over his chest, waiting for the satisfying sound of a successful transaction. The machine processed for 10 agonizing seconds. The digital display flashed processing in bold blue letters. Jamal smiled smugly at Beatrice, who was watching anxiously from the doorway. Howard stood behind her, biting his fingernails. Then the machine emitted a loud, harsh buzzing sound. It was an unmistakable, aggressive tone of rejection. The screen turned bright red, displaying the words, "Declined insufficient funds." A small paper receipt began to print from the top of the device. Jamal blinked, his smile vanishing instantly. "That machine is broken," he demanded, snatching the receipt as it printed. "Run it again." Mr. Vance retrieved the terminal, looking at the screen. "The machine is functioning perfectly, sir," Mr. Vance stated, his voice carrying over the sound of the blizzard. "The transaction was declined by your issuing institution. The exact response code is insufficient funds. You do not have the available liquidity to authorize this charge." "That is impossible!" Jamal yelled, his voice cracking with sudden panic. He pulled the card out and jammed it into the magnetic swipe reader, sliding it down with violent force. Processing flashed again. 10 seconds later, the same harsh buzzing sound echoed across the frozen porch. "Declined insufficient funds." Stephanie dropped her arms from Jamal's waist, stepping back. "Jamal, what is happening?" she asked, her voice tight with rising anxiety. "Why is it declining? We have millions in that account." "It is a glitch," Jamal insisted, his hands beginning to shake. He pulled out a different card, a personal platinum credit card, and jammed it into the machine. He jabbed the buttons aggressively. The machine processed. The loud buzzing sound echoed a third time. Declined credit limit exceeded. He pulled out another card, a gold rewards card. Declined. He pulled out a standard bank debit card. Declined. He tried a secondary business expense card. Declined, account frozen. With every harsh, buzzing sound, the heavy silence on the porch grew more suffocating. The reality of the situation was crashing down upon them with the force of an avalanche. The security guards exchanged knowing glances, stepping slightly closer to the door. Mr. Vance watched Jamal frantically dig through his wallet, pulling out loyalty cards and empty debit cards, completely stripping away the facade of the wealthy finance bro. "Sir," Mr. Vance said, cutting through Jamal's frantic muttering, "you have exhausted all available payment methods. None of your accounts possess the capital required to secure this property." Beatrice let out a horrified gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. "Jamal?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "You told me you were rich. You told me you secured a massive bonus this quarter. Why are all your cards declining?" Howard grabbed Beatrice's arm, his eyes wide with terror. "If he cannot pay, they are going to throw us out, Beatrice. The guests are arriving at 6 tonight. The caterers are coming. The mayor is on the guest list. We will be the laughingstock of the entire state. We will never be able to show our faces at the country club again." "Shut up!" Howard Beatrice snapped, turning her fury entirely onto Jamal. Do something, Jamal. Transfer the money from your investment accounts. Call your brokers. Fix this right now. Jamal stood frozen, staring at the pile of declined receipts fluttering in the cold wind. The arrogant sneer had completely vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He could not call his brokers because there were no brokers. He could not transfer the money because the money did not exist. The crushing weight of his fraudulent lifestyle was collapsing in real time in front of his mother-in-law and his wife. Stephanie grabbed Jamal by the collar of his silk pajamas, shaking him. "Jamal, look at me!" she screamed, tears of panic welling in her eyes. "Pay the man. Just pay the man. They are going to throw my designer bags into the snow. They are going to lock us out. My entire wardrobe is in there. You promised me we were secure." "I cannot," Jamal finally whispered, his voice breaking. The wind snatched the words away, but everyone heard them. "I do not have it, Stephanie. The funds are tied up. Everything is tied up." Mr. Vance retrieved his payment terminal from Jamal's limp hands. The estate manager stepped back, signaling to the two security guards. "The grace period has officially expired," Mr. Vance announced, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "Because you cannot provide valid payment, you are now trespassing on private property managed by Elite Estates Management. You have exactly 30 minutes to pack your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you are not off the property by 8:45, local law enforcement will be dispatched to escort you out, and you will be formally charged with trespassing." 30 minutes, Beatrice wailed, dropping to her knees on the marble floor of the foyer. "You cannot do this to us. It takes hours to pack. We have fragile items. We have an entire event being delivered." "I strongly suggest you begin packing immediately, Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Vance replied, signaling the security guards to step inside the foyer to monitor the eviction. "The caterers and floral vendors have already been notified by our corporate office that the event is canceled. They will not be arriving. Your 30-minute timer begins right now." The heavy oak doors remained wide open, letting the brutal aspen blizzard howl directly into the grand foyer. The freezing wind whipped around Beatrice as she knelt on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Stephanie was screaming at Jamal, hitting his chest with her fists, demanding answers about their bank accounts. Jamal stood completely paralyzed, staring blankly at the snow, realizing that his entire fake empire had just been obliterated. They were losing the mansion. They were losing the party. They were losing their social standing. And they had absolutely no idea that the struggling single mother they had kicked out into the snow just hours earlier was the exact person pulling all the strings. The panic was absolute, and it was only just beginning. Back in the warmth of the St. Regis penthouse, I was enjoying a completely different kind of morning. The storm was still raging outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside the suite the air was perfectly climate-controlled. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the living room with a comforting golden glow. I sat on the plush velvet sofa, wearing a thick monogrammed robe, holding a steaming mug of artisanal coffee. Leo and Mia were sitting on the thick rug, playing happily with the wooden building blocks room service had brought up with their breakfast. I reached for my phone, resting on the glass coffee table. I had placed it on silent mode the moment we checked in. When I tapped the screen, it lit up like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. The notification counter displayed 110 missed calls and 73 unread text messages. The sheer volume of notifications stacked on my lock screen was a digital monument to their absolute panic. I took a slow sip of my coffee and unlocked the device. I decided to read through the messages chronologically, tracing the exact trajectory of their spectacular downfall. The first wave of texts began at exactly 8 in the morning, right after Mr. Vance delivered the eviction notice. The tone of these initial messages was entirely predictable, dripping with the same toxic arrogance they had displayed the night before. Beatrice sent the first barrage. "Naomi, where are you? The estate manager is here making ridiculous demands. Get back here right now and help us pack these bags. You caused this with your bad energy. Come deal with these security guards immediately." Stephanie chimed in 5 minutes later. Her messages were typed in all caps, a digital temper tantrum. "You ruined everything, Naomi. Jamal is dealing with a massive banking error because of identity theft, and now these local losers are threatening to touch my Chanel luggage. drive your beat-up car back here and load my bags into your trunk. I am not letting these rent-a-cops put my things in the snow." Then came a text from Jamal. It was the most satisfying of all. "Naomi, my offshore accounts are temporarily frozen due to a high-level security audit. I need you to wire whatever meager savings you have to my personal account right now to cover this deposit. I will pay you back double next week. Do not make me ask twice." I laughed out loud, the sound startling Mia, who looked up and smiled at me. Jamal, the self-proclaimed millionaire, was actually trying to extort money from the single mother he had just banished to a freezing hallway. The absolute audacity of his request proved exactly how desperate he was. By 8:15, the tone of the messages began to shift dramatically. The arrogant demands dissolved into frantic, panicked updates as the reality of their eviction set in. The security guards had clearly started enforcing the 30-minute packing deadline. Beatrice was typing so fast, her messages were full of spelling errors. "Naomi, please answer the phone. They are actually throwing us out. The caterers just canceled. The florist is not coming. My friends are arriving at 6 and we have nowhere to go. Please tell me you have a credit card with a high limit. Howard is having a panic attack." Stephanie's texts evolved from angry demands to sheer hysterical terror. "Jamal's cards are all declining, Naomi. Every single one. He has nothing. I do not understand what is happening. The security team is carrying my wardrobe boxes out to the driveway. The snow is ruining the leather. Please, Naomi, you have to help us. We cannot afford a hotel in Aspen. We have no money." The missed calls piled up rapidly. Beatrice called 12 times in a row. Stephanie called 20 times. Even Howard, the man who had stood silently while his wife threw sleeping bags at his grandchildren, managed to call me 15 times. They were drowning, and they were frantically grasping for the very person they had tried to sink just hours before. At 8:30, the messages reached their pathetic climax. The 30-minute grace period had expired. They were officially standing in the blizzard. Beatrice sent a long, disjointed paragraph, abandoning all pride. "Naomi, please, I am begging you. I am standing in the freezing snow, and the gates just locked behind us. Jamal cannot even afford an Uber. We are stranded. I know I was harsh last night. I am sorry, okay? Just please come get us. Use whatever credit cards you have. Take out a loan. Do whatever you have to do to fix this. You are my daughter. You have to save us." Stephanie sent a photo attachment. It was a blurry, shaky picture of her standing in the snowstorm, surrounded by expensive luggage that was rapidly accumulating a thick layer of white snow. Her makeup was running down her face in dark streaks. "Naomi, please," she wrote beneath the photo. "Jamal is screaming at the police. They are threatening to arrest him for trespassing. I am so cold. Please come pick me up. I will do anything." I sat there in the luxurious warmth of the penthouse, staring at the photo of my sister shivering in the blizzard. For a brief, fleeting second, the old conditioning flared up. The ingrained reflex to rush to their rescue, to sacrifice my own well-being, to fix their mistakes, to be the good, obedient daughter. But then I looked at Leo and Mia. I remembered the cold draft of the mansion foyer. I remembered Beatrice prioritizing an empty guest room over her own grandchildren. I remembered Jamal swirling his wine and laughing at my expense. The conditioning vanished, replaced by a titanium core of self-respect. They had made their choices. Now they were experiencing the consequences. I set my coffee mug down on the glass table. I opened the group chat that included Beatrice, Howard, Stephanie, and Jamal. I did not write a long paragraph. I did not demand an apology or explain how much they had hurt me. They did not deserve an explanation. They only deserved the brutal, unvarnished truth. I tapped the screen, carefully typing my response. "I think you were right last night, Mom. I should have booked a hotel. The penthouse at the St. Regis is incredibly warm. By the way, you should read the fine print on luxury rental agreements before you sign them. The chief executive officer of Elite Estates Management just permanently revoked your stay. Best of luck in the snow. Naomi." I hit send. I watched the small text bubble appear on the screen. Almost instantly, 4 red receipts popped up confirming that they had all seen the message simultaneously while standing freezing in the Aspen driveway. I did not wait for their replies. I did not want to read their shock or their outrage or their desperate attempts to backtrack. I navigated to my phone settings and blocked every single one of their numbers. I set the phone face down on the table. The device was entirely silent. The storm of notifications had completely ended. The heavy, suffocating burden of my toxic family was finally severed permanently and legally. I stood up from the sofa feeling lighter than air and walked over to join my children on the floor, ready to build a new castle out of wooden blocks. The morning passed in a bubble of absolute peace. Room service cleared our breakfast dishes, and I spent 2 hours simply building wooden towers with Leo and Mia on the thick carpet. Around 11 o'clock, the children grew restless for a change of scenery. The St. Regis was famous for its grand indoor winter conservatory, a massive glass atrium filled with decorated holiday trees and a custom hot chocolate bar. I bundled the kids into their cozy sweaters, deciding a trip downstairs was exactly what we needed to celebrate our first day of real freedom. We took the private elevator down to the main level. The lobby was bustling with affluent guests returning from early ski runs or gathering for early lunches by the massive stone fireplace. I held Leo and Mia by their hands, walking across the polished marble floors toward the conservatory entrance. I was smiling, chatting with my son about the giant gingerbread house on display. I felt completely safe. I had underestimated Jamal's sheer desperation and my own slight miscalculation. As we neared the center of the grand lobby, the heavy revolving glass doors at the main entrance suddenly shoved open with violent force. A freezing gust of wind swept into the warm room, followed immediately by 4 figures who looked like they had barely survived an Arctic expedition. It was my family. Their designer clothes were soaked and stained with dirty snow and road slush. Stephanie's expensive mascara was smeared down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines, making her look utterly deranged. She was clutching a single ruined designer handbag to her chest. Jamal's custom-tailored suit was crumpled beneath a wet, oversized parka, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Howard trailed behind them, shivering violently and carrying 2 heavy bags that looked like they had been dragged through mud. And leading the charge was Beatrice. Her hair was a frizzy, wet mess, but her eyes locked onto me with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. How had they found me? In a flash, I realized my mistake. In my final text message, I had specifically mentioned the penthouse at the St. Regis to rub my warmth in their faces. I had handed them my exact location on a silver platter. Jamal had likely spent his last remaining favor begging a local driver or manipulating a free shuttle service into bringing them here. They had nowhere else to go and absolutely nothing left to lose. Naomi Jamal bellowed, his voice shattering the refined quiet of the luxury lobby. Several wealthy guests turned around their conversations, halting abruptly. Jamal stomped across the lobby, leaving a trail of dirty, melting snow on the pristine rugs. "You think this is a game? You think you can just press a button and destroy my professional life? I have investors calling me." I instinctively pulled Leo and Mia behind me, shielding them from his aggressive approach. Mr. Sterling, the general manager, immediately stepped out from behind the concierge desk, signaling for his security team to converge on the lobby. But before the guards could intercept, Beatrice pushed her way to the front. She saw the crowd of affluent guests staring at her wet, ruined clothes and her desperate family. Her obsession with social status kicked in instantly, overriding her panic. She could not look like a failure in front of these people. She had to control the narrative. She had to make me the villain to save her own skin. Beatrice threw her hands over her mouth and let out a loud, theatrical sob that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Oh, my poor, sweet Naomi," she wailed, dropping to her knees a few feet away from me. "Thank goodness we finally found you. We have been absolutely terrified." Her sudden shift from tyrannical abuser to heartbroken mother was dizzying. Guests in the lobby began to whisper, looking at me with growing concern. Beatrice stretched her arms out toward me, and the children, tears streaming down her face in a masterful performance. "Please, darling, you need to come home with us," she cried, her voice carrying a perfectly calculated tremor. "We know you are going through a severe mental health crisis. We know the stress of being a single mother has finally broken your mind. But locking your own family out in a blizzard, stealing your brother-in-law's credit cards to pay for this penthouse, it is your sickness talking, not you. Stephanie caught on to the performance immediately. She dropped her ruined designer bag and buried her face in her hands, sobbing loudly for the audience. "We forgive you, Naomi," Stephanie wailed, stepping up beside our kneeling mother. "Jamal is not even going to press charges for the financial fraud you committed against his accounts this morning. We just want to get you into a psychiatric facility so you can get the help you desperately need. Please just give us the keys to the suite so we can get the children to safety and warm up." The absolute audacity of their lie was breathtaking. Beatrice was using every manipulation tactic in her arsenal, trying to gaslight an entire lobby of strangers into believing I was a psychotic criminal who had stolen from my wealthy family to fund a joyride. She was banking on the assumption that I would crumble under the weight of public humiliation. She thought the stares of the wealthy elite would shame me into compliance, that I would hand over my penthouse keycard just to make a public scene stop. A few guests actually took a step back, looking at me with deep suspicion. A woman in a full-length fur coat whispered something to her husband, pointing a manicured finger at my children. Beatrice remained on her knees, holding her hands out, playing the martyred mother to absolute perfection. "You are scaring the children, Naomi." Beatrice wept loudly, ensuring the back of the lobby could hear her. "Please give Jamal the room keys. Let us fix the terrible things you have done." I looked down at Leo and Mia. They were not scared of me. They were terrified of the hysterical wet strangers screaming on the marble floor. I gently guided my children behind the sturdy frame of the general manager, who had stepped forward with 3 burly security guards. "Keep them safe for a moment," I whispered. He nodded firmly, placing a protective hand on each of my children's shoulders. With my kids secured, I turned my full attention back to the pathetic theatrical display unfolding at my feet. I did not shrink away. I did not lower my voice to hide from the staring guests. I stood up perfectly straight, crossing my arms over my cashmere sweater, and let a cold, razor-sharp smile spread across my face. "You deserve an Academy Award for that performance, Beatrice," I said, my voice carrying effortlessly through the cavernous atrium. "It is truly remarkable how quickly you can pivot from kicking your own grandchildren out into a blizzard at 1 in the morning to playing the heartbroken mother of a mentally ill thief." The murmurs in the lobby instantly changed frequency. The woman in the fur coat who had been pointing at me suddenly lowered her hand, her brow furrowed in confusion. Beatrice stopped fake sobbing for a fraction of a second, her eyes darting nervously toward the onlookers before she doubled down on her act. She reached out, grabbing the hem of my jeans. "You are delusional, Naomi," she wailed. "You do not know what you are saying. The stress has broken you. Please just give us the keys to the penthouse so Jamal can call the doctors." I took a deliberate step back, forcing her hand to drop empty to the floor. "Do not touch me," I commanded. "And do not insult the intelligence of everyone in this room by pretending you have a single maternal instinct in your body. Let us talk about this severe mental health crisis you claim I am having. Let us talk about the credit cards you just accused me of stealing." I projected my voice so every single wealthy guest and staff member could hear the unvarnished truth. "I did not steal anything from Jamal or you, Beatrice. The reason you are standing here soaking wet and homeless is because the $50,000 complimentary stay you begged for was just revoked." I paused, letting the number hang in the air. "You spent 4 months crying to the management company about Dad's retirement, begging for a free mega mansion to impress your friends and fake investors. You claimed you needed the charity because you were broke." Beatrice's face drained of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The wealthy guests watching the spectacle exchanged disgusted glances. In elite circles, nothing was more humiliating than being exposed as a broke grifter, begging for handouts. "I paid for that mansion, Beatrice." I continued, stepping closer to her kneeling form. "I paid $50,000 out of my own pocket to sponsor your 40th anniversary because I stupidly thought it would finally make you love me." "And how did you repay that gift?" "By tossing 2 deflated sleeping bags at my 5-year-old son and telling us to sleep on a freezing hardwood floor because Stephanie's suitcases needed their own master suite." Stephanie scrambled up from the floor, her face turning a violent shade of red. "Shut up, Naomi," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "You are lying. You are a broke single mother. You work a pathetic corporate job. You do not have $50,000. You are just jealous because Jamal is a highly successful investment director, and you could not keep a man if your life depended on it. You are trying to humiliate us because you are bitter and pathetic." I turned my icy gaze slowly toward my older sister. Stephanie had always been the golden child, the one who received the lavish Tuscan wedding, the designer wardrobes, the constant praise. She was entirely dependent on the illusion of superiority. "Stephanie," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register, "you are 34 years old, and you are standing in a luxury resort lobby screaming like a spoiled toddler while wearing a ruined knockoff cashmere blanket. You have never worked a day in your life. Mom and Dad mortgaged their retirement to pay for your destination wedding, and you repay them by letting your husband use their anniversary party as a networking scam." Stephanie gasped, taking a step back, as if I had physically struck her. "That is a lie," she shrieked. "My husband is brilliant. He makes millions." "Does he?" I challenged, tilting my head. "Is that why his heavy metal black card declined this morning for insufficient funds? Is that why every single credit card in his wallet flashed red when the estate manager asked him to pay for the house?" The entire lobby gasped. Jamal, who had been hovering aggressively behind Stephanie, suddenly froze. He looked around wildly, realizing that his absolute worst nightmare was coming true. His financial impotence was being broadcast to a room full of the exact type of high-net-worth individuals he spent his life trying to con. "You kicked my toddlers out into a blizzard because you needed an empty room for your luggage, Stephanie," I continued, taking a slow, deliberate step toward her. "You called me a loser. You told me I should have booked a cheap motel. Well, look around you, sister. I am standing in the most exclusive resort in Aspen. My children are eating fresh pastries in a penthouse suite. And you are standing in a puddle of your own melted snow, begging for my room key because you cannot afford a cup of coffee at the lobby bar." Stephanie's jaw trembled. She looked at Jamal, expecting him to defend her, to pull out his phone and magically fix everything. But Jamal was paralyzed, staring at the floor. "You are a monster," Stephanie whispered, her voice losing its aggressive edge and descending into genuine panic. "You set us up. You planned this whole thing to destroy us." "I did not set you up," I replied coldly. "I gave you a fully staffed, multi-million-dollar mansion for free. All you had to do was show me an ounce of basic human decency. All you had to do was let my children sleep in one of the 8 empty beds. But your greed and your arrogance were so massive that you could not even manage that. You destroyed yourselves. You handed me the matches and practically begged me to light the fire." Beatrice scrambled to her feet, her fake tears completely gone, replaced by a vicious, desperate snarl. She realized the victim narrative had failed entirely. The crowd was looking at her with absolute revulsion. "How dare you speak to your sister that way?" Beatrice hissed, stepping between me and Stephanie. "I am your mother. I gave you life. You owe us respect. You owe us that mansion. You will call the management company right now and fix this, or I swear to God, Naomi, I will destroy whatever pathetic little career you have managed to scrape together. I will call your bosses. I will tell them you are unstable. I will ruin you." I laughed. It was a loud, bright, genuine laugh that echoed through the quiet lobby. Beatrice flinched as if the sound itself was a weapon. "You are going to call my bosses?" I asked, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. "You are going to call Elite Estates Management and tell them their chief executive officer is unstable?" Beatrice froze. Her eyes darted from me to the general manager, who was standing quietly behind me with the security guards. The manager stepped forward smoothly, addressing my mother with a voice like crushed ice. "Madam, I believe you are confused. You are currently threatening the founder and sole owner of this management company. Ms. Hayes does not have a boss. She owns the entire portfolio, including the property you were just evicted from." The absolute silence that followed was deafening. Beatrice looked like she had been struck by a physical blow. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and incomprehension. Stephanie let out a small, pathetic whimper, stumbling backward and bumping into Howard, who had been hiding silently in the background this entire time. Howard just stared at the floor, looking like a hollow shell of a man. "You own it," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the lobby fireplace. "You are the CEO." "Yes, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I am the CEO. I am the woman who built a global empire while you were busy telling your friends I was a disappointment. I am the woman who bought you that vacation. And I am the woman who just took it away." Beatrice shook her head violently. The movement sent droplets of melted snow flying from her ruined hair. She let out a harsh, breathless sound that was half scoff and half choke. "No," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "No, that is impossible. You are a single mother. You live in a tiny apartment. You are lying. You hired these actors to embarrass us." Jamal stepped forward, his chest puffing out in a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. He looked at Mr. Sterling with utter contempt. "How much is she paying you to play along with this little prank?" he demanded. "My sister-in-law is a nobody. She does not have the capital to own a local coffee shop, let alone an international luxury management firm. You are going to lose your job for participating in this stunt." Mr. Sterling did not even blink. He maintained his perfect professional posture, his hands clasped behind his back. "Sir, my employment is entirely dependent on Ms. Hayes. She personally interviewed and hired me 4 years ago. I assure you this is no prank. You are currently trespassing on a property affiliated with her corporate network." The absolute certainty in the general manager's voice made Jamal hesitate. The aggressive posture melted away, replaced by a creeping, sickening realization. He looked at me, his eyes darting frantically, as he tried to reconcile the woman standing before him with the helpless victim he had mocked just hours ago. I did not need them to simply hear the truth. I needed them to see it. I needed to burn the reality of my success into their retinas so deeply that they would never be able to unsee it. "Mr. Sterling," I said, extending my right hand without taking my eyes off my mother. "The tablet, please." Without a word, Mr. Sterling produced a sleek silver iPad Pro from his folio and placed it gently into my open palm. The screen was already illuminated, displaying the highly restricted administrative dashboard of Elite Estates Management. The proprietary software interface was unmistakable, featuring the company's gold and black crest, a crest I had sketched on a napkin 7 years ago, when I was sitting in a cramped studio apartment trying to build a future for my children. I tapped the screen, bringing up the master file for the Alpine Crest property. I turned the iPad around and held it up directly in front of Beatrice's face. "Look at it," I commanded, my voice echoing with absolute authority. "Read the screen, Beatrice." My mother squinted her eyes wide and panicked as she focused on the glowing display. Her gaze tracked across the digital document. It was the exact promotional contract she had frantically signed just weeks prior, begging for a free stay to maintain her social illusions. "Look at the bottom of the page," I instructed, stepping a fraction of an inch closer, forcing her to confront the undeniable proof. "Look at the authorizing signature." Beatrice's eyes slowly dragged down to the bottom of the digital contract. There, printed in bold, elegant typography, was the final line of authorization. "Approved and executed by Naomi Hayes, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Elite Estates Management." Right beneath my printed name was my digital signature, an exact match to the one I had used to sign the eviction notice that had thrown them out into the blizzard. The physical reaction was instantaneous. Beatrice let out a short, strangled gasp. Her knees buckled slightly, and Howard had to grab her elbow to keep her from collapsing onto the marble floor. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking gray and ancient. Her carefully constructed reality, the illusion that she was the superior matriarch, graciously tolerating her disappointing offspring, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Stephanie pushed her way past Jamal, leaning over our mother's shoulder to stare at the screen. Her eyes scanned the document, absorbing the corporate headers, the legal jargon, and the staggering financial figures attached to the property portfolio. I watched the arrogant sneer melt off Stephanie's face, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. "You," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You actually own it. You own the mansion. You own the company. I own the ground you are standing on, Stephanie. I replied, my tone freezing the air between us. I own the properties where your fake elite friends spend their holidays. I sit on the board of directors for the hospitality group that manages this very resort. I control a portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars. While you were busy mortgaging your house to buy designer bags and pretending to be rich on the internet, I was silently buying the entire neighborhood. Jamal leaned in, his eyes fixated on the corporate dashboard visible behind the contract window. As a man who worshipped money, the sheer scale of the financial infrastructure displayed on that screen was staggering. He saw the daily revenue tickers, the international property listings, the automated billing systems that had flawlessly rejected every single one of his overdrawn credit cards. He suddenly realized that the woman he had tried to humiliate was not just out of his league, she owned the league entirely. You let us treat you like a beggar. Beatrice choked out tears of genuine shock, finally spilling down her cheeks. You let me throw sleeping bags at you. You let us think you had nothing. Why? Why would you hide this? I did not hide anything, I said, lowering the tablet. I simply stopped updating you on my life 5 years ago when you made it clear that my presence was an embarrassment. I invited you to celebrate my milestones, and you ignored them. I tried to share my success, and you talked over me. You were so blinded by your own narcissism that you never bothered to ask what I actually did for a living. You just assumed I was beneath you because it made you feel powerful. Beatrice's shock suddenly mutated into a grotesque, twisted version of maternal pride. A desperate, greedy light sparked in her eyes as the magnitude of my wealth finally registered. Naomi, she breathed, stepping forward and reaching for my hands. Oh, my brilliant girl, you are a CEO. You are a billionaire. We had no idea. If you own the company, then you can fix all of this right now. You can call the estate manager and tell him to let us back into the mansion. We are your family. We can host the anniversary party together. You can pay for the catering. We can tell everyone about your incredible success. The sheer velocity of her pivot was sickening. Less than 10 minutes ago, she had been trying to have me committed to a psychiatric facility to steal my hotel room. Now she was ready to parade me around as her ultimate trophy, simply because I had the capital she so desperately craved. Stephanie immediately latched onto the new strategy. Yes, Naomi, she pleaded, her voice dripping with sudden sickening sweetness. We can forget everything that happened last night. Jamal and I can even offer you investment advice to help grow your portfolio. We are family. Family shares their success. You have to let us back into the house. Our luggage is freezing in the snow. I looked at the four of them, wet, shivering, and entirely stripped of their dignity. They were literally begging the daughter they had abused and discarded to save them from the consequences of their own actions. They thought the revelation of my wealth would automatically bridge the chasm they had spent a lifetime digging. They thought my money belonged to them by default of blood. I handed the tablet back to Mr. Sterling, who received it with a solemn nod. I crossed my arms and looked directly into Beatrice's desperate, greedy eyes. There is no we, Beatrice, I said, delivering the final devastating blow. There is no family sharing. I bought that vacation for you as a final test to see if you had any capacity for basic human kindness. You failed spectacularly. You do not get to abuse me in private and claim my success in public. I took a step back, aligning myself firmly with the resort staff. The contract is canceled. The eviction stands. You are not getting back into my mansion. You are not getting a single dime of my money, and you are no longer welcome on this property. Beatrice let out a wail of pure despair, lunging forward, but the security guards instantly stepped between us, forming an impenetrable human wall. The truth had been fully weaponized, and their absolute destruction was now complete. The security guards maintained their impenetrable barricade, separating my terrified family from the sanctuary of the resort. Jamal realized that Beatrice's theatrical emotional manipulation had failed entirely. The crowd of wealthy onlookers was not swaying to their side. His own financial ruin was looming like a dark storm cloud, and his massive ego could not handle being publicly bested by a woman he had openly mocked just hours ago. He adjusted his damp, oversized parka, attempting to project the formidable authority of a Wall Street managing director. He pushed past his sobbing mother-in-law and pointed a rigid, trembling finger directly at my face. You think you have won because you hold the title of Chief Executive Officer, Jamal barked, his voice laced with absolute venom. You think you can just unilaterally terminate a binding agreement and throw paying clients into a blizzard? I'm a managing director at a premier financial institution, Naomi. I deal with high-stakes corporate litigation every single day of my life. You just made the biggest, most expensive mistake of your entire pathetic existence. I stood perfectly still, keeping my hands resting casually in the pockets of my cashmere robe. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I let his empty threats echo through the cavernous lobby, allowing the sheer absurdity of his legal posturing to settle over the crowd. I am suing Elite Estates Management for gross negligence and blatant breach of covenant, Jamal announced, squaring his shoulders and puffing out his chest. You violated the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing when you maliciously terminated our promotional contract without due process. I will personally ensure my legal team files an immediate motion for tortious interference. Your vindictive little stunt interrupted a multi-million-dollar international capital raise. My investors in Dubai were scheduled to finalize our funding terms this morning. Because you locked me out of the property and disabled the telecommunications infrastructure, you directly caused a catastrophic loss of prospective economic advantage. Stephanie, sensing a sudden lifeline, stopped her pathetic whimpering and nodded vigorously. She clutched Jamal's arm, staring at me with renewed venom. He is right, Naomi. You ruined his deals. Jamal has the best corporate lawyers in New York on speed dial. They will take your entire company. You will be completely bankrupt by the time we are done with you in court. And that is not all, Jamal sneered, taking a step closer to the security guards. I am adding secondary claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress and reckless endangerment. You forced my wife and my elderly in-laws into sub-zero temperatures during a declared state of emergency. That constitutes criminal negligence. I will petition a federal judge to freeze your corporate assets pending litigation. I will contact the Securities and Exchange Commission and file a formal grievance against your operating licenses. I will bury you in so many injunctions and subpoenas that you will have to liquidate this entire resort just to pay your legal retainers. The wealthy guests standing in the lobby murmured among themselves. To an untrained ear, Jamal sounded incredibly formidable. He was using the right buzzwords, wielding legal jargon like a weapon designed to intimidate and overwhelm. He thought he could bully me into submission by throwing around threats of federal audits and asset freezes. Are you quite finished, Jamal? I asked, my voice echoing with absolute icy precision. Because if you are going to threaten a corporate hospitality entity with litigation, you should probably brush up on basic real estate and contract law. Let us break down your imaginary lawsuit piece by piece. I stepped forward, forcing him to hold his ground. First, you cannot sue for breach of covenant on a promotional agreement that explicitly contains a unilateral termination clause. As the authorizing executive, I exercised my contractual right to revoke the complimentary status due to a hostile environment created by the guests. Furthermore, you signed a comprehensive liability waiver and a strict indemnification agreement when you checked into the Alpine Crest property. Clause 7 explicitly states that Elite Estates Management is held harmless from any incidental or consequential damages arising from a revoked stay, including alleged loss of business revenue. I tilted my head, watching his confident facade begin to show tiny microscopic fractures. Second, you cannot claim tortious interference when you were utilizing a residential vacation property for unapproved commercial activities. Tell me, Jamal, did you secure a commercial use permit for the estate? Did you notify our risk management department that you intended to host international financial transactions on our private servers? No, you did not. Operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise out of a residential rental is a direct violation of our terms of service and local Aspen zoning ordinances. If anything, my company has immediate grounds to countersue you for operating a fraudulent business front on our premises. Jamal opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off immediately. I was not going to give him a single second to breathe or formulate another lie. And let us address your ridiculous threat regarding reckless endangerment and eviction protocols. I continued, my voice rising slightly to ensure the entire lobby heard every single word. You are confusing landlord-tenant law with transient guest statutes. You are not a tenant, Jamal. You are a transient lodger holding a revoked promotional license. Under state law, the moment your payment methods declined and your license was revoked, you became a trespasser. My estate manager gave you a generous 30-minute grace period to vacate. The removal of a trespasser by private security does not constitute endangerment. It constitutes basic property protection. Stephanie gripped Jamal's arm, looking panicked. Jamal, tell her she is wrong. Tell her your lawyers can still freeze her accounts. Jamal swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously against his collar. He could not speak. He was completely paralyzed by the realization that I knew exactly what I was talking about. Speaking of freezing assets, let us discuss your brilliant plan to launch a massive corporate lawsuit, I stated relentlessly, driving the final nail into his coffin. In order to file a civil suit of that magnitude, you need to retain a high-tier corporate litigation firm. Those elite firms require a minimum retainer of $100,000 paid up front in verifiable liquid funds. Tell me, Jamal, how exactly do you plan to wire that retainer when your primary corporate card was declined for insufficient funds this morning? Jamal's face went completely ashen. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking physically ill. Yes, Jamal. I personally reviewed the merchant processing logs. I explained dealing the ultimate financial blow. When Mr. Vance attempted to authorize the $85,000 hold, your card bounced. Your secondary platinum card bounced due to a maxed-out credit limit. Your business expense account is frozen solid. You do not have the liquidity to buy a cup of hot chocolate at this resort, let alone fund a multi-million-dollar corporate lawsuit against a global management firm. He cannot tell you that, Stephanie, because he is entirely over-leveraged, I said, addressing my sister directly, but keeping my eyes locked on Jamal. You threatened to contact the Securities and Exchange Commission, Jamal. That is a truly fascinating strategy, because I am highly confident the SEC would be incredibly interested to know why a managing director is attempting to use a depleted corporate expense account to pay for a private family vacation. I took one more step forward, lowering my voice to a lethal whisper that cut through the silence of the lobby. Attempting to charge $85,000 of personal luxury expenses to a corporate entity is a textbook violation of your fiduciary duty. It is corporate malfeasance. It is embezzlement. It is wire fraud. Jamal took a physical step backward, his entire body trembling beneath his wet parka. The aggressive corporate alpha male persona had completely evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, desperate fraud who was staring down the barrel of federal prison. If you file a single piece of paper against my company, I warned, my eyes boring into his soul during discovery, my legal team will subpoena every single one of your bank records. We will mandate a forensic audit of your corporate expense accounts. We will depose your partners in Dubai and ask them why their managing director is conducting high-level capital raises from a borrowed vacation home while dodging declined credit card notifications. I will expose your absolute lack of liquidity to the public record. You will not just lose the lawsuit, Jamal. You will lose your financial licenses. You will be permanently barred from trading. You will face federal indictment for fraud. Jamal stood there, stripped of every defense, completely humiliated in front of the affluent guests he so desperately wanted to impress. His jaw worked silently, but he had absolutely no counterargument to offer. The hard, undeniable financial facts had crushed his intimidation tactics into dust. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life collapse into a sinkhole. Beatrice covered her face with her hands, letting out a low, miserable moan. Howard simply turned his back, unable to look at the destruction of his family's reputation. Stephanie let go of Jamal's arm, finally realizing that her husband was not a savior, he was a massive liability. Now, I said, turning my attention back to the general manager, who was watching the scene with profound professional satisfaction. Mr. Sterling, please have your security team escort these individuals off the premises. They are violating our loitering policies and causing a severe public disturbance. The security guards moved in a synchronized tight formation, closing the distance between the marble pillars and my ruined family. Mr. Sterling extended his arm, executing a flawless professional gesture toward the revolving glass doors. But as Jamal turned his shoulders, slumping in absolute defeat, a sharp, bright ping echoed from the tablet in my hand. It was a high-priority push notification from my corporate general counsel in New York. I glanced down at the screen, reading the subject line of the encrypted dossier that had just finished compiling. A slow, deliberate breath filled my lungs. "Wait, Mr. Sterling," I commanded, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the lobby. "Keep them right there. Do not let them leave just yet." The security guards immediately locked their stances, forming a physical barrier that trapped my family between the concierge desk and the freezing exit. Jamal whipped his head around, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Beatrice clutched her wet robe, her face a mask of complete bewilderment. When a guest defaults on an $85,000 invoice at one of my properties, my company does not just send a polite email, I explained, tapping the biometric scanner on the tablet to unlock the confidential file. My finance department automatically initiates a comprehensive global asset trace. My lawyers spent the entire night running your names, your social security numbers, and your corporate tax identification codes through every available financial database to prepare for a wage garnishment lawsuit. What they sent me 2 minutes ago is so absolutely spectacular that it would be a tragedy not to share it with everyone here. Stephanie let out a panicked squeak. Her hands flew to her face as if she could physically block the words coming out of my mouth. "Naomi, stop," she pleaded, her voice cracking into a pathetic whine. "Just let us go. You already won. Just let us walk away." "I am not finished winning, Stephanie," I replied, swiping open the first page of the dossier. "Let us talk about your pristine suburban estate, the multi-million-dollar home you constantly brag about on social media, the house you use to prove how much better you are than a struggling single mother." I looked up from the screen, locking eyes with my older sister. "You do not own that house, Stephanie. You barely own the front door. According to the county clerk records my legal team pulled, you took out your first mortgage 6 years ago. 2 years later, you took out a second mortgage to fund your lavish lifestyle and your luxury cars. But that was not enough to keep up the charade, was it? 6 months ago, you signed the paperwork for a third high-interest mezzanine loan from a predatory shadow lender just to keep your lights on." Stephanie staggered backward, bumping hard into one of the security guards who did not budge an inch. Howard let out a sharp gasp, staring at his golden child in utter disbelief. "And it gets worse. Stephanie," I continued, raising my voice so the entire lobby could hear the exact price of her fake perfection. "You are currently 90 days past due on your primary mortgage. Your custom-imported vehicles are flagged for immediate repossession. The bank filed an official notice of default last Tuesday. You are practically days away from a foreclosure auction. You threw sleeping bags at my children, calling us poor, while you are literally drowning in millions of dollars of toxic debt." "That is not true," Stephanie wailed, burying her face in Jamal's wet jacket. "Jamal, tell them it is a lie. Tell them we have the money." But Jamal could not speak. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving under his soaked parka. He knew exactly what was coming next. He knew that if my lawyers had uncovered the personal mortgages, they had absolutely uncovered the corporate rot hiding beneath his tailored suits. I swiped to the next page of the dossier, feeling a rush of pure, unadulterated justice. "Let us pivot to the mastermind of this operation," I said, turning my gaze to my brother-in-law. "Jamal, you talk a big game about international capital raises and overseas investors. You love using corporate buzzwords to intimidate people. So let us use some corporate buzzwords right now. Let us talk about fraudulent conveyances and structural insolvency." Jamal squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head rapidly as if he could shake the facts out of existence. "Your premier financial institution is a ghost town, Jamal," I announced, reading directly from the heavily redacted legal summary. "You do not generate millions. You steal them." My legal team audited your publicly available corporate filings and ran a cross-reference on your active limited liability companies. You operate a classic textbook Ponzi scheme. You promise your local investors 20% guaranteed returns, and you use the capital from your new marks to pay the dividends of your old ones. The wealthy guests in the lobby who had been watching the drama unfold suddenly let out a collective, audible gasp. In circles of high net worth individuals, accusing someone of running a Ponzi scheme was the equivalent of dropping a nuclear bomb. Several men in expensive ski gear leaned in closer, their eyes narrowed with disgust. You came to Aspen desperately trying to secure a cash injection from investors in Dubai because your domestic pyramid is entirely collapsing, I stated relentlessly, driving the blade deeper. The capital call is coming due and your accounts are completely empty. But my lawyers found something even more interesting than your empty bank accounts, Jamal. They found the active whistleblower complaint filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission last month by your former business partner. The federal government is already auditing your shell companies. You are not a managing director. You are a criminal waiting for a federal indictment. Beatrice let out a horrific, ear-piercing shriek. She lunged toward Jamal, grabbing him by the collar of his coat, shaking him with surprising physical strength for a woman of her age. "Is it true?" she screamed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his shoulders. "Is the money gone, Jamal? Are you under federal investigation? Tell me she is lying. Tell me my daughter is not married to a criminal." Jamal roughly shoved Beatrice away, sending her stumbling backward onto the marble floor. "Shut your mouth, Beatrice!" he snarled, his polished facade completely disintegrating into cornered animal panic. "You think you are innocent in this. You think your hands are clean." Jamal turned to me, pointing a desperate, shaking finger at his mother-in-law. "She is the one who set this up, Naomi. Beatrice orchestrated the entire Aspen trip." I looked down at Beatrice, who was sprawling on the floor, her wet robe tangled around her legs. Her eyes were wide with terror as she realized the spotlight of absolute ruin was swinging directly toward her. "Oh, I know Beatrice orchestrated the trip, Jamal," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, chilling whisper. "But what Beatrice does not realize is that you and Stephanie orchestrated her." I swiped to the final page of the dossier. The ultimate revelation that would burn their toxic family dynamic to the ground forever. "You think this week was about celebrating your 40 years of marriage, Mom?" I asked, staring down at the woman who had tormented me for my entire life. "You think Jamal and Stephanie wanted to honor your legacy? You are a prop, Beatrice. You are a useful idiot in their criminal enterprise." Beatrice's jaw dropped, her hands flying to her chest as if she had been shot. "What are you talking about?" she gasped. "We planned the anniversary gala together. Stephanie helped me pick out the caterers." "Stephanie helped you pick out the victim list, Mom," I corrected ruthlessly. Jamal needed an influx of new cash to keep his Ponzi scheme afloat, and he needed it immediately to avoid federal prison. But a disgraced broker with maxed-out credit cards cannot exactly host a luxury networking event to lure in new marks. He needed a multi-million-dollar backdrop to project an aura of immense wealth and stability. He needed the Alpine Crest mansion, but he could not afford to rent it. I took a slow, deliberate step toward my mother, making sure she heard every single syllable. "So they used your obsession with social status against you. They weaponized your pathetic need to show off. They convinced you to beg for a complimentary stay using your anniversary as a smokescreen. The 50 VIP guests you invited tonight, the local mayor, the socialites, the wealthy business owners, they were not coming to celebrate your marriage, Beatrice. They were fresh meat. Jamal and Stephanie planned to use your anniversary party as a high-pressure sales floor to trap new investors and steal their money to pay off Jamal's massive debts." Howard let out a loud, gut-wrenching sob, burying his face in his hands. Beatrice sat completely paralyzed on the marble floor, her eyes darting between Stephanie and Jamal. The crushing realization that her favorite daughter, her golden child, had willingly used her parents' milestone anniversary as a criminal front completely shattered her mind. "You used me," Beatrice whispered, her voice completely devoid of life. "You used your own mother as bait for a scam." Stephanie could not even look her mother in the eye. She turned away, staring blankly at the security guards, tears of total ruin streaming down her face. "You sold your soul for the illusion of superiority, Beatrice," I said, my voice echoing with absolute finality. You threw my children out into a blizzard because you thought Jamal was a king. You worshipped a fraud and you discarded the only daughter who actually built a real empire. Now you have nothing, no mansion, no party, no social standing, and when the federal authorities arrive to arrest your son-in-law, your entire reputation will be dragged through the mud on national television. I locked my iPad, pressing the biometric scanner to secure the dossier. The screen went completely dark, signaling the absolute end of their reign of terror. "Mr. Sterling," I said, turning my back on the pathetic, sobbing mess of my biological family. "I am finished with them. Please have security escort them out into the storm. Ensure they do not take a single piece of hotel property with them." As I walked back toward the private elevators to return to the warmth of my children, the sounds of Beatrice's hysterical wailing and Jamal's panicked screaming echoed through the lobby. But I did not look back. I stepped into the elevator, the heavy brass doors sliding shut, completely silencing the noise and severing the final toxic tie to my past forever. As the elevator ascended, the transparent glass back wall provided a perfect, unobstructed view of the lobby floor below. I could not hear their voices through the thick acoustic glass, but the physical explosion of my family was as clear as a silent movie playing out in real time. Beatrice scrambled to her feet, her silk robe slipping off her shoulder. She lunged at Stephanie, grabbing her by the collar of her expensive but unpaid-for coat. I watched my mother, the woman who had spent decades worshipping her golden child, violently shake Stephanie. Beatrice was pointing frantically at the wet luggage and then at Jamal, clearly demanding to know how her perfect elite anniversary party had become a federal crime scene. She was realizing that all her bragging, all her country club posturing had been built on stolen money. Stephanie slapped her mother's hands away. Her face contorted in an ugly, vicious snarl. She pointed right back at Beatrice, shifting the blame entirely. Stephanie was violently gesturing toward the exit, likely screaming about how Beatrice was too stupid to realize the vacation was a scam, blaming her mother for begging for the free mansion in the first place. The facade of the perfect wealthy mother and daughter duo had completely disintegrated into a frantic, vicious brawl over who was responsible for their impending bankruptcy. Jamal did not try to intervene. He did not try to protect his wife or calm his hysterical mother-in-law. Instead, he scanned the lobby exits like a trapped rat, calculating his escape route. I watched him slowly back away from the screaming women, attempting to slip toward the side doors while they were distracted. He was fully prepared to abandon Stephanie right there in the lobby, leaving her to face the wrath of her parents, the resort security, and the federal authorities entirely alone. But Howard finally woke up from his decades-long cowardly slumber. My father, who had never raised his voice or defended me once in his entire life, suddenly intercepted Jamal. He shoved his fraudulent son-in-law hard against a marble pillar, blocking his escape. Howard jabbed his finger aggressively into Jamal's chest, his face purple with uncharacteristic rage. He had mortgaged his own retirement to pay for Stephanie's lavish Tuscan wedding, and now the crushing realization hit him. This con artist was about to drag the entire family into a federal indictment and absolute financial ruin. Jamal shoved Howard back, his arrogant finance persona replaced by the thuggish desperation of a cornered criminal. He threw a wild punch that missed my father, but the physical altercation was the final straw for Mr. Sterling. I watched the general manager signal his security team. 4 massive guards descended on Jamal, pinning his arms behind his back and marching him forcefully toward the exit. Stephanie chased after them, screaming and clawing at the guards to let her husband go, while Beatrice collapsed onto a luggage cart, weeping uncontrollably into her hands. Howard just stood there, utterly broken, watching his fake elite family being physically dragged out of a 5-star resort and thrown back into the howling aspen blizzard. The elevator reached the penthouse level with a soft, comforting chime. I stepped out into the quiet, warm corridor. They had turned on each other the exact second their money and status evaporated, proving that their family bond was nothing but a fragile transactional illusion. While I walked back into my warm penthouse suite to hold my children, the scene unfolding back at the Alpine Crest mega mansion was far from the elegant 40th anniversary preparation Beatrice had envisioned. By late afternoon, the brutal aspen blizzard finally began to break, leaving behind a thick blanket of pristine white snow across the valley. The sky turned a brilliant bruised purple as the sun started to dip behind the jagged mountain peaks. There were no catering trucks unloading trays of expensive caviar. There were no florists carrying towering arrangements of white orchids. Instead, 3 vehicles from the Pitkin County Sheriff's Office were parked at sharp angles across the grand circular driveway, their red and blue lights reflecting off the snowdrifts. They were flanked by 2 massive black SUVs belonging to the elite private security firm my company contracted for high-risk evictions. The estate manager had not been bluffing when he warned them about the strict eviction timeline. He stood on the sweeping stone porch, holding a thick stack of legal documents alongside the local sheriff. Inside the mansion, my security team was executing a rapid and ruthless pack-out protocol. They swept through the 8 luxury suites, gathering Stephanie's designer clothing, Beatrice's expensive cosmetics, and Jamal's custom-tailored suits. They shoved everything indiscriminately into heavy-duty industrial trash bags and hauled them out to the front gate, tossing them onto the frozen pavement. The expensive luggage Stephanie prized so much was unceremoniously dumped into a growing pile of shame at the bottom of the long driveway. At exactly 5 o'clock, a battered local taxi slowly navigated its way up the mountain road and pulled to a halt outside the wrought iron gates of the estate. The driver looked incredibly annoyed as he demanded his fare. Jamal stepped out of the cab, his wet parka now stiff with ice. He looked completely defeated, but the sight of his belongings sitting in heavy black trash bags seemed to reignite a desperate, futile spark of outrage. Stephanie scrambled out behind him, shrieking, as her boots sank deep into the snow. Beatrice and Howard emerged last, looking like refugees from a war zone rather than the elite society members they claimed to be. Beatrice rushed toward the gates, but a towering security guard immediately stepped forward, blocking her path. She grabbed the frozen iron bars, shaking them with whatever limited strength she had left. "Let us in!" Beatrice screamed, her voice hoarse and cracking in the frigid air. "We have guests arriving in less than an hour. The mayor is coming. You cannot leave our things in the snow like this. My gowns will be ruined." The sheriff walked slowly down the long driveway, crunching through the snow, until he reached the opposite side of the gate. He did not look angry. He looked entirely unimpressed. He held up a clipboard displaying a freshly stamped court order. "Ma'am, you need to step back from the gate," the sheriff commanded, his voice carrying absolute legal authority. "You are officially trespassing on private property. The management company has exercised their legal right to terminate your promotional stay, and I am here to execute a formal eviction notice. If you attempt to breach these gates, I will arrest you and your entire family for criminal trespassing." Jamal pushed his way to the front, attempting to salvage whatever shred of corporate dignity he possessed. He pointed a shaking finger through the bars at the sheriff. "You have no idea what is actually going on here," Jamal lied, his voice wavering. "My sister-in-law is having a psychiatric breakdown. She hacked into the management system to lock us out. I am a managing director and I am hosting a major capital raise tonight. You need to let me inside to make some phone calls." The sheriff let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Save the corporate pitch, son. I just got off the phone with the legal department at Elite Estates Management. They sent over the contract you defaulted on, and the local magistrate already signed off on the eviction. Grab your trash bags and call another cab before I put you in the back of my cruiser." Just as the sheriff delivered that devastating reality check, the low hum of expensive engines echoed up the mountain road. The timing could not have been more spectacularly poetic. A sleek black town car rounded the bend, followed closely by a pristine Range Rover and a silver Mercedes. These were not taxis. These were the high-net-worth investors Jamal had lured to Aspen under the guise of an exclusive networking event. These were the local socialites and country club elites Beatrice had invited to witness her fake triumph. The town car pulled up directly behind the battered taxi. The tinted rear window rolled down slowly, revealing a wealthy older man wearing a tailored camel hair coat. He was the primary target for Jamal's fraudulent Ponzi scheme. The investor peered out the window, his expression shifting from polite anticipation to profound confusion and then to absolute disgust. He saw Jamal, the supposed financial genius, standing in a puddle of muddy slush, arguing with a county sheriff. He saw Stephanie crying hysterically while digging through a black plastic trash bag, trying to rescue a pair of frozen designer heels. He saw Beatrice, a woman who had spent months bragging about her multi-million-dollar anniversary rental, clinging to the locked iron gates like a common criminal. Jamal froze. He locked eyes with the investor, and the last remaining drop of blood drained from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another elaborate lie about a misunderstanding or a banking error, but the investor simply shook his head. The older man pulled out his smartphone, tapping the screen with deliberate precision. He was clearly calling his financial compliance officers to freeze any pending transfers to Jamal's firm immediately. The investor tapped his driver on the shoulder and the window rolled up, sealing away any chance Jamal had of securing his fraudulent bailout. The town car threw it in reverse, executing a sharp three-point turn on the icy road before speeding back down the mountain. The Range Rover and the Mercedes immediately followed suit. The guests did not even bother to roll down their windows to ask what was happening. The sight of the police lights, the trash bags, and the desperate screaming family was all the information they needed. The elite society Beatrice worshipped had instantly evaluated her true worth and summarily rejected her. Beatrice collapsed against the cold iron gate, watching the taillights of her entire social standing disappear into the dark aspen night. The grand illusion was officially dead. They were left with absolutely nothing but the freezing snow and the unbearable weight of their own spectacular ruin. I watched the taillights of the investors' vehicles fade into the distance, directly from the glowing screen of my iPad. From the absolute safety and warmth of the St. Regis penthouse, I had unparalleled access to the high-definition security feeds positioned around the Alpine Crest estate. The cameras captured every agonizing second of their downfall in crisp 4K resolution. I sat on the edge of the plush velvet sofa, resting my feet on the heated floorboards, holding a steaming mug of chamomile tea between my hands. The contrast between my current reality and their frozen nightmare was breathtaking. The digital feed displayed Beatrice sliding down the frozen iron bars, her face buried in her hands. Stephanie was frantically digging through a ripped black industrial trash bag, trying to locate a specific piece of designer jewelry, while the brutal aspen wind whipped her ruined hair across her face. The poetic justice of the scene was a soothing balm to a lifetime of deep emotional wounds. For 31 years, I had been the family's scapegoat, the designated target for their insecurities and their cruel jokes. They had mocked my small apartment, my budget-friendly clothes, and my status as a struggling single mother. They had treated my children as inconvenient burdens to be hidden away in hallways and mudrooms. Now I watched as Stephanie's prized vintage leather luggage, which she had explicitly demanded a separate master suite to protect, was rapidly disappearing beneath a fresh layer of heavy wet snow. The expensive silk blouses and custom Italian suits they had meticulously packed to impress their fraudulent investors were crumpled on the icy pavement, absorbing the dirty road slush. Jamal stood paralyzed beside the idling local taxi, completely stripped of his arrogant finance persona. He was just a cold, broke man standing in a puddle, staring blankly at the impenetrable iron gates of an empire he could never infiltrate. The man who had sneered at me, swirling a glass of Opus One just 24 hours ago, now looked like a panicked fugitive waiting for the sirens to close in. His absolute financial ruin was playing out live on my screen, a direct consequence of his own unbridled greed and his fundamental underestimation of the woman he had tried to humiliate. Across the room, Leo and Mia let out a burst of joyous, unfiltered laughter. I glanced up from the tablet, pulling my eyes away from the security feed. Room service had just delivered a massive chocolate fondue station, complete with artisan marshmallows, fresh strawberries, and warm pastries. My children were completely oblivious to the destruction of their toxic relatives. They were safe-loved and entirely insulated from the cold cruelty that had defined my own childhood. Seeing my son smile without a trace of anxiety, the same anxiety that used to grip my chest whenever Beatrice entered a room, validated every single ruthless decision I had made tonight. I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the warm liquid soothe my throat. On the security monitor, Jamal suddenly snapped out of his catatonic state. Sheer desperation drove him to make one final pathetic play. He approached the lead security guard, pulling a heavy gold watch from his wrist and thrusting it toward the man. He was actively attempting to bribe a highly trained corporate security operative with a piece of jewelry just to gain access to the property's lobby to make a phone call. The guard did not even blink. He maintained his stoic professional stance, simply shook his head, and pointed his gloved finger directly up at the security camera mounted above the stone pillar. Jamal followed the guard's finger, looking straight into the lens. I knew he could not see me sitting in my penthouse, but our eyes met across the digital divide. The panic in his expression was absolute. I tapped the microphone icon on the security application, activating the two-way audio system installed at the front gate. "Keep your fake watch, Jamal," I stated. My voice broadcasting crisp and clear through the external outdoor speakers, cutting right through the howling mountain wind. My security team is paid exceptionally well. They do not accept bribes from criminals currently under federal investigation. You have exactly 2 minutes to clear my driveway before I have you arrested for criminal trespassing. The sudden sound of my voice dropping from the sky like a localized deity made all four of them physically jump. The reaction was spectacularly satisfying. Beatrice whipped her head around, staring wildly at the camera lens as if looking at a ghost. Howard shrank back against the side of the idling taxi, looking completely terrified. Stephanie dropped the trash bag she was holding, her face contorted in a mix of pure horror and profound defeat. She finally realized the inescapable truth that I was watching their every move, controlling their entire environment from a seat of absolute untouchable power. The taxi driver, who had been waiting impatiently, leaned heavily on his horn. The harsh, loud blare snapped them out of their shock. The driver yelled out the window that he was turning the meter on and leaving with or without them. The mad, undignified scramble that ensued was the perfect finale to their reign of terror. Stephanie and Jamal began frantically shoving their snow-covered trash bags into the cramped, dirty trunk of the cab, completely disregarding the fragile designer items inside. Beatrice and Howard piled into the back seat, shivering and defeated, squished together in a space meant for 3 people. Jamal slammed the trunk shut, wiping freezing slush from his face, and climbed into the front passenger seat. The taxi threw its tires in the slush, spinning for a fraction of a second before finally gaining traction. I watched the vehicle lumber down the dark mountain road, its taillights fading into the relentless blizzard, until there was nothing left but the pristine, untouched snow outside the gates of my mansion. I pressed the screen, locking the application and severing the connection. I set the tablet face down on the coffee table, wrapping both hands around my warm mug. The show was officially over. The morning after the blizzard broke clear and remarkably bright. I sat at the mahogany dining table in the penthouse while Leo and Mia ate blueberry pancakes. I opened my laptop to a scheduled video conference with my lead corporate counsel, David. He appeared on the screen, looking impeccably sharp and radiating the kind of ruthless legal efficiency I paid him so well for. "Good morning, Naomi." David greeted me with a satisfied nod. The package was delivered successfully at exactly 8 o'clock this morning. We located your family at a budget motel just outside the county line. The local process server handed the documents directly to Jamal and Beatrice. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Tell me everything, David. I want to know exactly what they are looking at right now." David held up a thick manila folder. First, they received the itemized invoice for comprehensive business disruption. Because Jamal attempted to run a fraudulent investment seminar on a residential property managed by our firm, we billed them for the emergency dispatch of our elite security team, the immediate deployment of local law enforcement, and the administrative costs of nullifying the promotional contract. When combined with the unpaid standard nightly rate and the anniversary party deposit, the new total comes to $112,000. They have 14 days to pay the balance before we file a formal civil judgment and initiate asset seizure. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Good luck finding any assets to seize," I murmured, thinking of Stephanie's triple-mortgaged house. "What about the rest of it?" David pulled out a second document bearing the official seal of a federal judge. The emergency restraining order was granted without a single objection. It is a permanent, comprehensive, no-contact mandate. Beatrice Howard, Stephanie, and Jamal are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of you. Leo and Mia. They are prohibited from contacting you via phone, email, social media, or through third-party intermediaries. If they attempt to approach your home, your corporate offices, or any property managed by Elite Estates Management, they will be arrested immediately for violating a federal court order. A profound physical weight lifted off my chest. For 31 years, Beatrice had used manipulation and access to control my life. Stephanie had used proximity to belittle me. Jamal had tried to use intimidation to silence me. Now the law itself had built an impenetrable fortress around my children and my business. How did they react to the delivery, I asked. David chuckled, a rare sound from the serious lawyer. The process server reported that Jamal tried to refuse the envelope citing jurisdictional errors, but shut his mouth the moment the server mentioned the ongoing federal investigation. Beatrice apparently collapsed onto one of the motel beds, crying hysterically about how she had lost her golden years. "Excellent work, David," I said. "We are officially done with them." I closed the laptop, satisfied. 6 months flew by with the swift, brutal efficiency of absolute justice. The federal investigation into Jamal did not remain a quiet corporate audit for long. On a crisp Tuesday morning in April, the Securities and Exchange Commission formally indicted him on 34 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and running a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. The arrest was broadcast across every major financial news network. Federal agents escorted him out of a cheap leased office space in handcuffs, his tailored suits replaced by the harsh reality of a criminal booking. News helicopters captured the exact moment his arrogant finance persona completely shattered. He tried to offer a pathetic plea bargain, but the authorities had a mountain of evidence provided by his own defrauded partners. The managing director who once scoffed at my ability to afford gas was summarily denied bail and locked in a federal holding cell. The total collapse of Jamal's fraudulent empire dragged Stephanie directly into the financial abyss. When the banks officially foreclosed on their triple mortgage suburban estate, she had exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises. The repo agents were ruthless. Tow trucks arrived in the middle of the night to repossess her custom-imported vehicles, while her former wealthy neighbors watched eagerly from behind their curtains. Stripped of her designer wardrobe, her fake money, and her artificial superiority, my older sister experienced a spectacular fall from grace. With zero income and a mountain of legal debt, she had absolutely no choice but to pack her remaining clothes and move back in with our parents. Beatrice and Howard had also faced a severe reality check. The financial fallout from the Aspen disaster and the legal fees from their various failed maneuvers completely drained whatever meager savings they had left. They were forced to abandon their facade of wealth and downsize into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the extreme outskirts of the city. Now Stephanie was sleeping on a lumpy pull-out sofa in their tiny, drafty living room. She was finally experiencing the exact lack of hospitality and comfort she had once demanded my young children endure. For Beatrice, the financial ruin was painful, but the social execution was entirely fatal. The story of her spectacular eviction from the Alpine Crest mansion spread through her elite circles like wildfire. Her precious country club memberships were quietly but firmly revoked. Dinner party invitations completely ceased. The wealthy socialites she had spent decades desperately trying to impress now crossed the street to avoid being seen with the mother-in-law of a federally indicted scam artist. She could no longer play the role of the affluent matriarch. She was a recognized social pariah, permanently exiled from the high society she valued more than her own flesh and blood. Whenever she tried to show her face at local boutiques, the piercing whispers and pointed stares drove her right back to her cramped apartment, trapped forever with her bankrupt husband and her ruined golden child. The contrast between their miserable exile and my current reality could not have been more profound. December arrived, bringing a fresh blanket of pristine snow to the Rocky Mountains. This time, I returned to the Alpine Crest mega mansion, not as a secret benefactor, but as the rightful owner hosting my own flawless celebration. The estate was completely transformed for Christmas. A massive 20-foot fir tree stood in the grand foyer, decorated with glittering gold and silver ornaments. The radiant floor heating I had disabled for my family was now turned all the way up, keeping the entire house incredibly warm and welcoming against the bitter winter chill outside. There were no deflated sleeping bags in the hallways. Leo and Mia were running joyously across the imported marble floors, chasing each other in matching holiday pajamas. They had claimed the enormous East Wing Master Suite for their own epic fort-building adventures. Laughter echoed through the vaulted ceilings, replacing the toxic hostility that had poisoned this exact space just 1 month prior. I walked into the chef's kitchen, holding a mug of rich hot chocolate. The house was filled with people, but not blood relatives, who demanded expensive handouts. I had invited my chosen family. My closest friends who had supported me when I was a broke single mother building a business from scratch were sitting around the massive island. My fiercely loyal executive team from Elite Estates Management was relaxing by the roaring stone fireplace in the great room. We were sharing an authentic, drama-free holiday feast prepared by a private chef who smiled as he worked. There was no walking on eggshells. There was no desperate need to impress fake investors or maintain a facade of false superiority. There was only genuine love, mutual respect, and absolute peace. I stepped out onto the heated stone porch for a moment, letting the crisp mountain air brush against my face. The driveway was perfectly clear, melting the falling snow instantly. I looked out over the vast, breathtaking landscape and took a deep, stabilizing breath. I had survived their abuse, their financial manipulation, and their relentless attempts to make me feel small. I had built an empire while they built a house of cards. The ultimate lesson I learned from throwing my own toxic family out into a blizzard is that blood does not grant anyone a free pass to disrespect you. DNA does not entitle abusive people to your resources, your time, or your mental health. Sometimes the most profound act of self-love is looking at the people who are supposed to protect you and realizing you are much safer walking away. Setting a ruthless boundary is not an act of cruelty, it is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You alone hold the power to dictate your worth. And when you finally stop accepting the floor, you might just realize you already own the entire mansion. The story of Naomi's triumphant stand against her toxic family offers a profound lesson on the true nature of self-worth and boundaries. For years, she endured her family's relentless belittling, financial manipulation, and blatant favoritism, all while secretly building her own successful empire. When her mother and sister cruelly forced her young children to sleep on a freezing floor just to accommodate a fake status-obsessed lifestyle, Naomi didn't scream or beg for the love she had always been denied. Instead, she recognized a powerful, life-changing truth. Blood relations do not ever grant anyone a free pass to disrespect, diminish, or exploit you. The ultimate victory wasn't just in the contractual eviction or exposing Jamal's fraudulent scheme. It was Naomi's internal realization that she no longer needed their validation. By revoking their complimentary stay, she permanently revoked their toxic power over her life. She demonstrated that setting firm, protective boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but the absolute highest form of self-preservation and maternal love. We must learn to stop accepting the floor when we already own the mansion. Evaluate the relationships in your own life today and dare to walk away from anyone who repeatedly diminishes your value